Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Valad, and welcome to today's webinar, Localizing Visuals. There's a Better Way with SnagIt. We're so happy you're joining us here today. Like I said, my name is Jason. I'm an instructional designer and master trainer here at TechSmith, and I'll be your host for today's session. But the bulk of the information, the knowledge share, and the expertise is going to come from my friend and teammate and coworker, Miss Kelly Mullins. Kelly, good morning. How are we doing today?
How you doing, Jason? I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. This is a topic I'm really passionate about.
This is a truer statement has never been made. Kelly is truly passionate about this. In fact, Kelly's been with TechSmith for over 20 years, and a large portion of that time has been focused on localization efforts, and she is officially our localization coordinator, part of our team on the customer education team, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. But before we get into the content, there's some housekeeping I want to cover first to make sure this is a great experience for all of you. First, today's agenda. Kelly's going to talk about a lot. Like, I'm hoping we can get through all this. There's a lot to cover here. She's going to talk about the managed approach to your localization efforts, how to go through and audit your images and see what actually needs to be touched up, what maybe needs to be replaced. We'll talk more about that. We're going to talk about making some really tough decisions. And that happens on a weekly basis on our team about content creation, the challenges surrounding localization of your images, the once and done process that she's developed here at TechSmith and that could be developed at your place of work, and then tips and tricks for creating images for localization, as well as many questions as we can get to within our allotted time here from the attendees. Number one question I get asked, Kelly, hey, is this webinar being recorded? Yep. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will get a link to that recording in the email that you use to register for this session in about 24 hours. Now, this email is not only going to have the link to that recording, but some other great pieces of resource material that Kelly's going to talk about during today's session. That link you can share with as many people as you like, watch it, rewatch it, share it with people that couldn't get to this session, or maybe you think could find the information valuable. We talked about questions. So at the bottom of the Zoom webinar interface, there's a couple of tabs. The couple that I want to bring your attention to, first and foremost, is the Q&A. So the questions and answer tab is there because we have a slew of TechSmithies as part of our session today that are going to do their best to help answer questions. Those include Robert and Amy and Casey and Emmy and Jason and Joe and Paul and Sarah and little old Kelly and I. If you hope to get a question seen and possibly answered, you want to put your questions in that Q&A section. We can't guarantee we'll get to all of them, but we will do our best. Now, there's also the chat button to the left of that, and that's for casual banter, back and forth, sharing of ideas. If you ask questions in the chat, we can't guarantee we're going to get to those because the majority of our focus is going to happen in the Q&A tab. There's also a live transcription button, a closed caption button down there. We turn this service on through Zoom if you would find it valuable. It's pretty good. It's live transcribing. It does a really good job. I'm actually kind of surprised by it. If you would find value in that, you have that capability to toggle that on your own machine. And for people that have not been in a Zoom webinar before, you're seeing the slides probably on the left and maybe Kelly and my face on the right. There is a slider bar there that you can click and drag to the right to get more of the presentation screen, because there's going to be times when Kelly or I are just talking and we'll turn off the camera so that we make sure that we turn off that so that you can get heavy focus on the screen. And I think that's what I wanted to cover for the getting started. But now we're going to get into the bulk of the presentation. So Kelly, this is where I hand it off to you. I'm going to play her humble assistant and pass along questions. Make sure you have questions that you have, put them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer those. But Kelly, I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Okay, let's just go to the first slide. And I want to tell you about TechSmith journey. Right now, we create Camtasia in 7 different languages. We put out SnagIt in 6 different languages. We have our written and video tutorials available online in 6 languages. We have blogs available for you in 3 languages, our websites in 5 languages. We've been localizing for 18, 19 years, and we work with 2 different localization service providers on a regular basis. And we don't have a lot of different service providers. We've been working with the 2 that we have for several years and have a very, very good relationship with them. So that's where we are currently on our journey. And go ahead, Jason. And what we're going to talk about today is a managed approach, how to audit your images, what that means, how to make these hard decisions and what those hard decisions might be for your organization, how to talk about churn and visually see it and understand it, once and done processes, which is something that we work on at TechSmith every single day. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for creating the best images you can that can be localized or don't even need localization. Go ahead.
Yep. And side note, everything Kelly's going to be talking about today, I, as a member of her team, live and breathe this right next to her, along with the rest of our instructional designers and information developers. The guidelines that she's going to share, the ideas she's going to share, we put into practice nearly on a weekly basis, if not sometimes during the year, during a daily basis. So stay tuned to all that information. So sorry, I had to say it because it's the truth.
It's the truth. Yep. So what is a managed approach? So years and years ago, 20 years ago or 19, when we first started localizing, we found a vendor and we just started throwing stuff over the wall to them, and it wasn't working. We weren't ready. We didn't have any internal processes ready. We didn't have management of any kind of files. We didn't have consensus on what localization meant. We didn't use the same tools. We didn't use the same file locations. It was really a hot mess. And if I knew then what I knew now, everything would have been completely different. So this is really the purpose of what we're going to talk about today. These are lessons learned from me to you out there. If you're thinking of moving into the localization realm, 90% of what you need to do starts with you and your company and your team. The first thing you do is not go out and find a provider. The last thing you do is go out and find a provider. And one of the biggest challenges you're going to have is, what do we do about all these images we have? Do we localize them? Do we recreate them? How do we recreate them? Do we pay someone to make them? And on and on and on. What I have on the screen right now is called the localization model of maturity. If I had known about this, life would have been different. When we started on our localization journey, if you see number 1 down there, which is ad hoc, that's just kind of willy-nilliness, we were probably a -5 on this chart. It took us a long time to even level up to number 1. I would say that we are now on the mature number 6 level, but it's taken us several years to get there. We also have an LSP that helps us with a lot of designing automation on the back end. Yes.
Kelly, there's already been questions too. Can you tell us what an LSP is, and are we okay to say who our LSP is?
I'm not sure. I
think it's fine. I think it's totally fine.
So an LSP is a localization service provider. There's there's hundreds and thousands of these companies out there that are doing this. Some use AI machine translation. Some don't do video. Some only do words. There's so many. You're going to have to figure out your own journey to figure out who you pick and who you use. I met a company maybe 17, 18 years ago at a trade show that I was at, maybe in Portland or something. And we started a discussion and we started working with them. And that company is called Rubric, if we can mention that. They do all of our translation for our software. They translate our web pages. They translate our tutorials. And for our tutorial videos that you see, that Jason creates and Ryan, and they recreate those videos for us in the other languages. So the managed approach to that is we make videos in such a way that we are able to send our video projects to them and they're able to create those. For our tutorial videos, or tutorial pages, we work in WordPress now. We create those in such a way that we send them through WPML, which is the WordPress language management system. And we send those over, and Rubrik is able to get those automatically. We automate just about everything we do with them now. So we are in this automated, almost turnkey kind of process here. And it's taken us years and years, and our localization service provider has helped us get there. They do a lot of work on their end to kind of jive with us, like GitHub development and things like that.
Cool.
So,
all right,
let's move on. But this is a reference for you guys that you can look up on your own and start to study about what that means. So a successful localization program demands, will not work without a managed approach. That means for everything you localize, you're going to have a process, and you're going to have like a once and done process. You need somebody that's going to be looking at these processes on a regular basis. It's what I do every single day. If we want to create a different type of tutorial, I need to look at that kind of tutorial and work with everybody on the team to say, how can we recreate that in our other languages efficiently, in a way that's cost effective, that we can scalable, and that's repeatable in this managed approach. So image creation is its special thing. It's huge, it's big, and file management is something you need to tackle right away.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why we're talking about images today. If you create images and you want to get on the localization path, this is a perfect place for you to start, because it's going to take you a while to figure this out. And once you get on the path to understanding how to do this, you've bitten a big chunk of your localization journey off and tackled it. So let's go on.
Okay.
So when we talk about file management, we're talking about everybody on the team using common tools. If someone on your team is using Photoshop, and someone is using SnagIt, and someone is using Canva, and somebody's using something else, you guys cannot access shared files. You can't work with shared files. You can't send the files to later on to a localization service provider if they don't have those tools, all of that. And certain file management concerns are the creation tools. What are you using? Everybody on our team, of course, uses SnagIt, but we also use Canva. Our localization service provider uses SnagIt, and they use Canva. Once in a while, we might have marketing images that need some other kind of something, but by and large, we use SnagIt and Canva, and that works for us. Storage, where are you going to store your images? That was a huge hurdle for TechSmith to get over. We could store things anywhere we wanted to, and there really doesn't go by a week when I'm not asking people still.
Yep.
That's
true.
Where are the images? Wait.
Kelly, we haven't perfected this yet?
I wish. I think we're really good, but
all right. Just checking. Just checking.
And I think this becomes even more complex if you have another agency, another department in your organization is maybe using an agency to create files. So they get files back and say, can you localize these? But I'm like, well, where are the project files? Oh, I didn't know you really needed those. I thought you could no, we do need those. So now you've got another third party that we need to teach and school them on what we need when they send things back to us. Image file naming conventions. This may be the hardest thing you come across. It is something that just needs to happen. Your whole team, your whole organization needs to come to an understanding about how you're going to name your files. And if you look at the example that we have here, we use a very simple methodology. We put the two-digit, two-letter language code at the beginning of our graphics, and the rest are the same. And we actually have built automation into our WordPress documents So when we send these over for localization, the linguist simply changes the 2-letter code at the beginning of the graphic name for these thumbnails that are on our tutorial pages. And we have automation built in to automatically pull in the correct image. So I don't have to do those manually every time. So once you start naming your graphics, you all the same, putting them in file folders, whether it's on Dropbox or whatever, in a common place where everybody can get to them, so that you are not having to figure out where Johnny is because he's out of the office for 2 weeks and you can't get to his graphics because they're on his laptop that he has with him, you know, in Tahiti or something. So file naming conventions, file types, what are you going to use? And your project types.
Yep.
So this is the first thing you really need to have a discussion with your team about. All right.
And to be honest, if you can figure out 1, 2, and 3, you're probably going to help yourself on more than just localization. You're probably ahead of the game right there. So
yeah.
Yep.
So one thing that you'll want to do after you have that meeting with your team and you work through all of that, you are going to want to define the different images your organization has. And I have an audit sheet example that we'll look at, but you create an audit sheet, you assign your visibility and brand impact to each graphic, and you assign the localization effort for each type. Go ahead. So here's a look at, it doesn't have to be major, it's a Word document or a Google document. And you can see that I have the team and it has everybody at TechSmith say who makes videos and graphics of some kind, the image location of where it resides. Does it go on Facebook? Does it go on LinkedIn? Is it a booth image, a postcard, a handout? Is it a tutorial article? You're going to look at the visibility and brand impact and assign those. Are these high visibility and do they impact your brand? For instance, if we go to a trade show and we need booth images and postcards and handouts and things that are, you know, high visibility for that event, we're going to translate those fully if we need to. Those are not things that are low impact. However, if we go down to our user assistance help file pages, we have said for us now that those are low impact. And those used to be high impact on our radar, and we're going to walk through that. But we made the very hard decision years ago that in tech support articles and help tutorial pages, we were going to restructure our images to where we were not going to localize those because it was a full-time job for 5 people to do nothing but recreate images over and over in the other languages. So this is something that people can create. Let's move on.
Okay, so
all right,
there's so many questions, Kelly, that have come in that I think are going to get addressed by this. So if you've been asking us how we handle our localization and how we send things to our vendor, it has matured, as Kelly said, over time. This is like, if it's going to be on the test, listen to this part.
Okay, so do you want me to answer that question?
Nope. I think this process is going to kind of tell them about it. If it comes back up, I'll definitely let you know.
All right. So we, years and years ago, I decided to deploy what I call once and done process model. And that comes from my background working in food service. I was kind of a low-level chef for a lot of years. And you cannot, when you're in, you know, making a wedding banquet for 1,000 people, you can't be redoing things over and over. You need to be able to do things once and done and be done with it. So I joke that I could write a book on everything I've learned about localization I learned in food service, and it's true. So bringing that to TechSmith, everything we do, we want to do in English once, and my team, any team, moves on with their next project. And I should be able to take whatever they have done and put it in our other languages. And my team never needs to touch that object again until they redo it. That means if Jason makes a video, he hands me the video project and I take it from there. It goes over to the localization agency. They now create that in all of our other languages. They upload that to our Wistia platform. They put all of our captions that have been timed in that platform, and those then go automatically into our WordPress tutorials. And Jason never has to see that video again until he redoes it.
Yep. Yep. And the way it used to be is we would send it to Kelly. Kelly would send it over. They would craft it. Then they would send it back. They would send the SRTs back. They'd send the images back. They'd send the thumbnails back. We would reassemble them on our side. We would then upload them. We would then QA them. We would then build the website. Then we would source all the material and organize it and put it away. This is magic. This is magic. There's no other way of saying it. It allows us, for the people that are focused on content creation, to create the content they're good at and let the professionals like Kelly and her team work through all the localization pieces. There's a lot of expertise in there, trust that's built into there, and some bumps and bruises, right? We figured it out as we went through it.
Yep. And it took us a long time to get here because we weren't set up on platforms that could do this. There's a lot of reasons, but when this comes to images in particular, every time you touch something, every time you redo that image or you have to recreate that image in another language, you are causing churn. And every time you're churning, you're spending money and time on that. So the whole premise of this presentation is you create an image once and you're done with it for all languages. And this removes the churning cycle. Sometimes we create an English version and we pass files over for our localization service provider to create. For instance, our Black Friday images. We have those created in a way that are easily localizable. We hand those files off to our localization service provider. They translate the text, they put the images back together, and they send us a finished project or product back. And then those go out for our Black Friday sales. But sometimes our team creates the completed image for each language. And typically that means English only or a simplified user interface image. Let's move on. So I want to talk about churn so you understand what I'm exactly talking about. So for one UI screenshot or web image, a common process might look like I would create the original source image, I send it for review, I incorporate the feedback, I repeat it for final feedback, I upload it or add it to the resource, like a help file, a Flare project, or onto the web, whatever. I repeat the same process in 3 or more languages, and every language takes at least 2 times longer. And then for the next release, because we have so much vested in this one image, we need to update it, and then we repeat, and then number 1, we repeat number 2, and we're in this cycle of churning. So let's look at that visually on the next slide. So here we have, this is, when I made this image years ago, I was really proud of this, right? It took me forever. This was before we thought we would localize. So now we take everything I had created and now I have to make this in Japanese and Korean and Italian, whatever we were doing at the time. So you can see, I cut this out and I made all these little call outs on the side that were nice and shadowed and all of this. And can we go to the next slide? And then here I was stuck in this churn, Japanese, Korean, German, what do we have? French here. And these particular graphics had to be QA'd extensively to make sure that they matched the UI exactly. They took forever. This one graphic could maybe take me a week to do in all the different languages. By the time I had to set my computer over to the other languages, and in Windows, back in the day. That wasn't an easy process. So let's move on. So this visually looked like this. The English was the outside orange ring, create, review, incorporate feedback, review again, blah, blah, blah. Then, we have Japanese, and then we have German, and then we have whatever. And I was just in this swirling cyclone of churn. So let's go to the next one. To get out of the churn, the once and done model says we need to be efficient and scalable. And now we will use an image like you see in the ring above. It's a zoomed in SUI graphic that shows and orients the user to where they are in the software or on the page. Yes.
So a question just came in that I think is tied directly to what we're talking about, Kelly.
All
It's an anonymous person said, once and done seems good, but what about content that changes over time? For example, the location of a button has changed and it affects multiple documents. They said they suppose this is not a localization issue, but could be, right? They suppose the answer
absolutely.
is, well, weighing the impact of the user's experience and the process by which they're trying to learn something. Is that button impactful to what they're trying to learn? I just wanted to bring that up because we'll kind of address that even later on in how we weight things, but
so let's use that example. So can we go back one?
Go back one? What do you think? Okay, there you go.
Or two. Go back two. Let's look at the button.
Sure.
We've changed buttons. See that capture button at the top of the screen for SnagIt?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've changed the way it looks and we've changed the way it, where it appears. So let's go forward.
Yep.
Now, if we had that image here, we would show the red capture button and it may say capture, but we don't need to exactly show it in reference to everything. So if people know where to look for that red capture button on the screen, is that sufficient for your help documentation? Can we trust a user to look at the screen and know where to identify that red capture button? So in this model, you would see that same image then passes through automatically to our other languages. So this is an image that would work for all of our languages. It's a once and done model. It's efficient, it's scalable, it's repeatable. And then we move on from this image. So let's see what else we have on the next slide. So we're going to address that question a little bit more when we get into our tips. There are image content do's and don'ts, and this is something that you can take directly back to your team and you can start talking about it today. There's content that you don't want to use that you can't localize. One of the do's that you want to use is images in conjunction with numbers and tables. Don't add text directly on your images anymore. We use SnagIt. SnagIt is great at callouts and it's good for that purpose, but for localization specifically, localizing callouts, placing the callout text, getting the wrapping of the callouts. It was hard to use. It was time consuming. That created churn in its own right. So we made the hard decision to say no more text in graphics. So we create a nice clean image and then we create a table in the help file or the WordPress page. And we maybe put numbers on the page that are localization ready to go. And then we put the content that matches the number in the table. When that HTML page or other text page goes for localization, it's automatically taken care of in the localization process. So that image is done. We don't have to think about it anyway.
Yeah, and we're going to show examples of all these too.
Yep.
We want to show those too. So, yep.
Yep. So we zoom way in now and declutter. So we orient the user to what is on the screen that we're talking about. And then we talk about it either below in a 1, 2, 3, or we describe it in the table. We use simplified images and we use SnagIt to create that. It's the simplified image tool. If you have not used that tool, it's a lifesaver for you right now. We employed that in SnagIt when we started using simplified images a lot. And it's a lifesaver for us. You might want to have a hard discussion in your organization about the use of English-only images. That was a hard decision to make. And it took us months. It was angst-filled. It was changing the way people did their job. This was not easy. Being a localization coordinator, you have to bring up the hard questions and you have to think about making drastic changes. That's part of your process improvement plan to get your company to climb that localization, the ladder. So we also created a corporate mock asset library.
Yep.
So,
which we use all the time. So we don't. So all the hard work that Kelly did on the front side of this, that took all those months and those hard decisions, she's crafted this massive library of mock assets, things that you might have seen if you've watched any of our tutorials. You've seen a mock asset. If you've watched any of our webinars, you've seen those mock assets where we can instantly grab something that's I call it clean, right? Is that a good description? If there's no text or very little text, so that I can quickly modify it or make changes, or I can create a piece of content that requires very little localization needs, because there's nothing that needs to happen to that particular graphic because it's already been prepped for a more global audience.
Right. And I think we have some examples of that. And another thing is to separate text from all images. If you're sending over marketing images and they have text on it, that text should not be embedded in your image. You cannot localize images that have embedded text. So I think if you have a marketing department or a department that makes graphics, you can start to work with them and say, we need to have different layers of text. We need to be able to export that text out. And we'll talk a little bit more on that, I think, as we go. So let's move on. So if you include any of these items in your image, you're going to need more than one source image. So since once and done goal is to use only one image for all languages, you want to avoid hand symbols, gestures, body parts, right? That just makes good sense. Religious symbols and icons, you don't want to include those. Animals that invoke an emotional response of some kind. Flags, political imagery, babies and children. So all of these are off topic for us. We do not use any of these. Let's go to the next image because we do use people. And this is a mock asset that Chandra on our team created not long ago, and you may have seen this in a video or two. And this is an example of a mock asset. We have it in other languages, and you'll see that Chandra used people, but the people are fully clothed. So you can see we want to be able to have the freedom to create the kind of content we want, but you don't see any bikinis here or Speedos, right? So appropriate for all regions, all languages. All right, let's move on. And here's an example of a mock asset. We created this fake web page, and sometimes we use lorem ipsum, sometimes we use actual text if we need it on the page. So this is something that you would have seen in our videos. We have it translated, created in our other languages, and when somebody needs something to use in a video or a graphic or in the SnagIt tray, they would go to the mock asset page, find the language they need, and here they have content already created for them. Let's move on to the next. So here's where these are directly from videos taken from our website. You see the mock assets in use, and you would see this same video being created in all of our other languages using the same mock asset. So when we send these for translation and recreation, our vendor gets the mock asset and they don't have to worry about what content they're going to use. We provide the assets for them. It makes everything go much quicker. And it's organized and it's all looking the same, right? All right, let's move on. So I can't stress this enough. To remove all your call out or caption text from your source images. Use a well-trimmed image to orient the user to the location on the page or screen. Add descriptive or instructional text below the image in a caption or a table. The purpose of the images, we have rethought our process for images, and our purpose of the image is to orient the user on the screen to the location, not to show them the entire user interface. It's to orient them on the screen. This is how we can use all images in English for our help, because the UI is all the same and we're just orienting them to a location. And then the text explains where they're at and what they're going to do. Let's see if I have an example of this. All right, this is an example of what not to do. This is a very old
Very old.
Yeah, this is, yeah, I wanted to show us at our most
vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
So this is a screen, lots going on this screen. We have squares, arrows, numbers, text. We have a call out. This is our old way. And let's move on to the next. And now here we have a SUI image, a simplified interface of a timeline in SnagIt. And we orient the user by giving them a nice, clean visual representation of that video timeline. We give them some cues to let them know that we've made a selection on the screen. We use the step tool for our 1, 2, 3, 4s. And then all of the explanation is put into a table that goes for translation via XLIF file or whatever down below in the other language. And this is a once and done graphic that we do not have to translate. All right, let's move on. So we zoom in and declutter because we only want to orient the user to where they are on the screen. So here we have a Camtasia timeline, and whatever we're going to talk about in this image on the left, we only were looking at this one clip that's highlighted in orange. So we could have used a bigger graphic, and we would have translated this in the past because track 3, track 2 might have been, needed in the other languages, etc. But by zooming in and decluttering and removing the bulk of the area around it, we really only needed to use the place that is going to orient us to where we are on that timeline and what needs to be done. So we highlight the clip, we use an arrow that says you can either drag it or you can pull that area out to lengthen it. And then this image is once and done ready. Again, underneath this image would have been a table or some translated text letting people know what's going on and how to use it.
I got to tell you, Kelly, as one of the people that makes videos, I would always argue for this side, right? Like this, we need this context. We need to have this, but being instructed because of the value to the user to zoom in, to declutter it, it actually makes the editing easier and helps tell the story a little clearer because I don't have all this peripheral noise going on. I'm literally focused on exactly what they need to see. So not only is it benefiting the localization process, but it's actually benefiting the end result of the help content because it's drilling right down like you just need to know this.
Yes. And in the end, our purpose at TechSmith is to help and delight our customers. We want the best help files. We want the best tutorial videos. We want our help files, our tutorial content, and our videos and our images to be good examples of what other people can create because we use our own products to create what we use and make. So you're right. We found that this is a better way to help our customers by giving them more focus. All right, let's move on and see what else we have here. Okay, so I hope that answered the question about the button. If we move a button, if you orient on the button, people can find that button on the page. You do not need a giant user interface screen to show where that button is. Just give them the button with a little bit of context around it to orient them, and then talk about that, the steps and how to use in a table or, you know, a ordered list or something underneath the image. So the use of simplified images, SUI images. Simplified images remove the literal portions of the screen or image and replace them with simple abstract representations. So the main benefit of using this is they don't need constant maintenance or translation. They can be used for video, marketing, instruction, training. Everything you do can use a SUI image. We call it SUI for short. They also allow the viewer to really focus in again on what's important within the image. See, and this is a key statement, because what we were just talking about, Jason, there's so much going on in a big UI screen. We can zero their focus on what is important within the image. So I did put a link here for people to see a tutorial about using SUI. And if you've never used that feature in SnagIt, it may become your best friend. All right, let's move on and look at some examples here. So these are all SUI images, and we do recreate them in our other languages, but you can see there's not a lot of translation that needs to go on. So this is a good example of a SUI image mock asset that can be used. Let's go to the next. Here are some current SUI images that you see on our website right now. You can see that these work pretty much for all languages. We don't need a lot of churn, localization, time spent on these. If we make one great image in English, we can use it for all the other languages.
Yeah, for people that have, you've seen these images before, you just may not have known what they were. You see them in advertisements, you see them in print media. If you've logged into any kind of account where there's a profile picture of you, before you put that profile picture up, there's that little fake avatar, just kind of a rounded human shape of a head with no features whatsoever. That's a simplified image. You don't need to be told what that is. You know, right, that's for a picture. So that's a large representation. Like, you know, most likely that that's an image. You definitely know that a sideways triangle in 2023 is probably a play button. It's those kinds of things that you've already internalized as part of your learning.
Yep. So you see it even on YouTube. If you're, you know, refreshing the page, it'll show, you know, SUI representations of videos that are going to populate. It's everywhere. Maybe you'll pay more closely attention to it now that you're recognizing it, so you can get some good examples of what you can make yourself. All right, let's move to the next. All right, so English only images. This is the most effective way. If you do help files, support articles, lots of screenshots, this is the most effective way to reduce image churn. And it's probably the hardest notion and decision to get your head around. I understand it. We went through this. There were people that thought it was impossible. It was never going to work. But I did a lot of research. Can we go to the next page on this? And I looked to other companies as well, and we're going to see an example, a couple examples of that. And I talk about this more in depth in the PDF document and show other examples. So this particular topic is discussed in more detail in the PDF. So traditionally, we thought all the images that we had to do had to be done in all languages. So we became a processing team. You know, we would create the help file in English, and then we would just process all these, recreate all these screenshots in Japanese, Korean, German, French, whatever languages we were doing at the time. It took days and days and days, days that could have been used creating other content, creating other videos, doing other work. It's at some point the churn becomes so unmanageable in this, and the literal cost per image becomes too high. And paying somebody outside your agency to create all these images is exorbitant. It's unmanageable in itself. So it's at this place, if you are at this stage where you're trying to make all these help images in all these other languages, or you say, well, never going to be able to do it, you're at a stage where efficiency, scalability required you look at new and radical solutions. So I'm telling you what our radical solution was. It's worked out well for us. And if you study larger companies, and I relied heavily on Evernote, I spoke with them in person at length about images and all of this. They translate into over 20 languages, and they are employing the English only images with great success. And I leaned on their success a lot to get us to where we are now. So let's move to the next. And here's an example of an Evernote image in English. So they orient the user to where they are on this particular Evernote page, what they're trying to teach. They use a well-crafted arrow and highlights to show what they're talking about. And for 20 languages, if they have this support article in that language, all of those are done in English with the text below explaining. So this is an example. In the PDF, I show you other companies using this same technique. All right, let's move on.
Just as a quick time check for you, Kelly, we got about 12 minutes or so.
Oh dear, okay. So this approach is going to require conversations and with your team to figure out what your own global strategy and growth model is going to be. For us, English-only images, when used in conjunction with the other techniques like the zooming in, the SUI, the numbers, putting the text down below in a table for translation, that provided a viable once-and-done approach to free up internal resources for us to move on to other things and get us out of that graphic churn cyclone. All right, let's move to the next. Mock assets. So if you need to create a website, this is the problem we had with assets. We wanted to create a book, we wanted to create a PDF, we wanted to create a video, but we didn't know what to show. So a big discussion is like, what are we going to use, for the sample, for what's shown? And we didn't want it to be confusing, because when you're showing a UI within a UI, it can be confusing for the people trying to get the instruction. So we came up with mock assets. I said, we have to kind of move to this. And we can do them in versions that don't need to be translated, and we can do them with some that can be translated. So I call them mock assets, and go to the next page. It might be Trello boards that are interactive. Yep. Fake Trello boards we have that you can pull the cards from here to there. We send the Trello boards over for localization, and then we have these same mock assets in 6 languages. And they have interactivity with them, so you can record how to take a capture here and use these. All right, so it could be Trello boards. It could be mock data.
Yep, these are all familiar.
Yeah, you'll see these on our website. These are fake. And you can see this one's in Japanese. So some of it is in Japanese, but a lot of it is SUI. Let's move on. We have infographics that are in our corporate colors or different colors. Those come with pages that have players on them, so you can grab a player. We have all of these different bits and pieces that you can pull and bring into, your screen inside Camtasia if you're making a recording, or put them on the timeline as clips, put them in the SnagIt capture tray if you need to show that. Let's move on. Here is a perfect example of a SUI mock asset kind of Actually, this is not SUI. It's a mock asset screenshot, and it has all mock assets in it. I build these from scratch, pulling from other areas, and I just build this image out.
Mhm.
And it can be quickly replaced, those images, with the German, French, whatever version. All right, let's move on. So we talked a little bit about this, so we won't spend too much time, but when you bake in or flatten text on images, you cannot localize them. You just can't. The time-consuming and inefficient process of baking in or putting text within an image is got so much potential for error that don't even try it. Don't just make a decision right now that you're never ever going to do that if you need to localize. It either has to be on a separate layer, or you can put the text in a Word document or a Google document, but never flatten in text. No call outs, nothing like that. All right, let's move on. So here's an example of an image that's on our website that would have text in it. If we were to send this flat image as it is over to our localization provider, they would have a heart attack, because it's just not easy. They have to start from scratch, a whole new project. So here's the efficient and automated process, and I've put it here for you so you can think about this later, that you put the text into a Google document or a Word document. You use simplified or mock assets for the screenshot or other imagery behind. So you see we have a SUI asset. We have a picture of a mountain, needs no translation. You use, the background image, no translation. You package up the complete resources and you zip it all up and you send it for localization, and then you receive back all your files in the other languages that look just like this, only in French, German, etc. And there you go. Simple. Took us a long time to figure this simple out, really. All right, let's move on. You can try to keep me on time. So, okay, we're at the conclusion. And this is all in the PDF, and can you go one screen further? In the PDF, you're going to, can you go? Yeah. There's kind of a project that you can work on with your team, and this is outlined in the PDF. This is a team activity for you guys to kind of roadmap the journey of one of your images. It can be a marketing image, whatever, and how many hands it touches, how many people look at it, where it goes, where it lives, and see how much time, money, energy you would spend on that one image. So for the person who was asking about that one screenshot where they move a button, how much time are you spending on tracking that button across the UI over and over and over? This is a good project for you. So let's go back one screen for the conclusion. And so I think things to speak about with your team are, when do you actually need an image? And be intentional about where you use images, because you may not need as many as you think you do, especially if you're orienting the user, using numbers, and then explaining down below in the other language what it is that you're teaching them. And discuss when should you use simplified images or photos or a screenshot, and come up with a standard for each. With the focus of reducing the workload when it comes to product upgrades, maintenance of the image over time, and all of that. So that's probably the biggest thing people have to be concerned about, is your product is changing all the time. How can the feedback loop for an image be reduced or even eliminated? Do we really, if we have a focused SUI image that orients the user, do you really need to have feedback on those images? Can you just cut it out and not do that anymore? Can you limit, by using these tips and tricks, can you limit the feedback cycle to further reduce time on task and reduce the churn? And how often will you update the images? Will you be able to skip updating for maintenance level releases? Can simple changes be made to images so total rework can be eliminated? And I think with SUI, you will find yourself not having to do all these updates. If you zoom in and focus and declutter, you won't be having to do all these maintenance level releases. So that's it in a nutshell. There's more in the PDF.
Yeah. So outstanding work. We do have a couple questions that I'd love to get your opinion on,
Okay.
Kelly, as we wrap up. Well done. You got it within the hour. I'm shocked. We got through all that. So as we were earlier on, we were talking about the once and done method. And
Yeah.
Debbie was talking about a tool that they use, an AI voice translation service called Murph.
Okay. I know Murph.
And I thought you would. What do you have any once and done guidelines, suggestions for audio? And I know this one, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but I'd love to know your thoughts around the once and done as far as audio.
Yeah, audio is difficult. And let's say we wanted to create an audio of this webinar. I think the only way that you could do this is if you were to use Rev or something to rip the audio out, put it to text, and use an AI voiceover methodology for that. Now, on our voiceovers for our videos that we use on our tutorial pages, those are scripted, totally scripted. And when you begin to write that script, if I edit it, I'm saying this won't translate well, this won't work well, this is confusing, can we make this shorter? So those scripts are very precise for a reason, and that is so we can send them for translation, and they translate well in every language we do. And when we go into the recording studio booth, those can be recorded in 1 sentence increments. So when we go to put them on our videos, because German, French, Spanish are longer than the English, those can be well timed. So there's a very specific once and done process we use for our scripting. If you're using off the cuff type of language, and we're kind of experimenting in this realm ourselves, that this type of video would need AI voiceover for it, probably. Right now, I'm experimenting more with Amazon Polly, and if nobody has looked into Amazon Polly, it's a free service beginning. It's one of the best AI voiceovers you can get. I recommend that one. And we also don't do our voiceover for all of our videos, say in Japanese. We have a lower usage of our tutorial videos. So we do the screen recording, but we have voiceover in English for those with subtitles. However, I'm doing experimentation right now to see how well AI voiceover is received in, say, for tutorial videos with Japanese. Haven't got the results back from that yet, but it is something that we're looking at, because as we want to do more and more content, we have to have more viable, quicker, more cost-effective, scalable solutions. So I hope that gave them kind of some idea.
I believe it did, actually. There's been a lot of people already going into the chat thanking you. Very informative. And appreciation for how candid you are about it, and that this is an ever evolving thing, even for us at TechSmith. We have not solved this, but we are well down the field as opposed to where we were before. So before we were, in my terrible sports analogies for today, we used to be parked in the lot adjacent to the stadium. Now we're at least dressed and ready to play. We're in the stadium. So
that's
folks,
a good analogy.
Before I say our goodbyes, I do want to say our thanks. But when you log off of this webinar, you are going to be prompted to take a quick 1-minute 4-question survey to give us feedback on this session. It's actually how we review your suggestions and comments to build webinars like today's session with Kelly. We were like, this is something people are interested in. Let's create a session on it. So we appreciate you taking the time to fill that out. But at this point, I want to say thank you to all the TechSmithies that have been supporting you in the background, for all the questions that have been answered. And Kelly, thanks to you for sharing this knowledge. And I kind of believe we're going to want to do something else along these lines as we grow our experience. So I want to say thank you. Is there
Okay.
anything you'd like to say as a parting words for our session?
No, but thanks for everybody who attended. And I think if you download the PDF, it's something that you can go through. I know if you go out and try to find a localization service provider, you're going to try to be sold something. And I guess my biggest takeaway here is everything you need to do to get started on localization, you need to do internally first. And this is one of your first projects to tackle to get you on the road. And it's all outlined in the PDF document. There's discussion, examples, how-tos. I think I put a case study of my own back in the back of that PDF. And then there's the team building event that you can do.
Yeah,
So,
and if you've got SnagIt at your disposal already, you're already part of the way there for crafting those images, using the Simplify tool. We've got all those tutorials. So thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate all of you, and we'll hope to see you at the next webinar. You can always check those out at techsmith.com/webinars. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
See ya.